So the news keeps coming with Diamond now, breaking that they are unable to pay some of their publishers. This is a bad sign, but what does it mean? The headlines are a bit scary, but how bad is this? Well, pretty bad, but there is some context here. Hey everybody, this is Perch. We're trying to sort out kind of exactly where Diamond's at. And the simplest way, I think, to start this is simply to state that a lot of the suspicions people have had with Diamond and where they're at and where they're going and their health and their viability have proven to be accurate. There's been a lot of people who've argued with things, certainly I've said, things that others have said about Diamond and their general health and where they're at. And now, as we're seeing, this stuff seems to be coming true. That Diamond has had some kind of core business issues, and they have for a while. So, what brought this to a head today is that Diamond's made a number of moves. Certainly, they basically, Marvel had let Diamond off of the payment hook. You got to imagine that Marvel makes out a bunch of Diamond's revenue or their outgoing payment, certainly, and their revenue. So this allows. So over the weekend, basically, Diamond said that Marvel said that they allow some extension of terms with Diamond. Not unusual. I believe that has actually happened before at different times where there's been cash flow issues, but that was kind of the first step that maybe more trouble was coming. Then we heard, or kind of around the same time, we heard of a number of layoffs in regard to Diamond, which has taken place, where either furloughs or just basic people are told, your job is at least on hold, or in some cases permanently on hold. And then the next step was kind of the news that Diamond has sent out to a number of their vendors, saying that the supply chain disruptions have cash flow implications and that they are not able to pay their vendors that they were scheduled to release this week. Now, why is this important and what does it really mean? Well, it means that there are companies that had received product and basically sold that product or delivered that product to shops, whether shops are open or not are a different story. Diamond had received at least some payment, or that there are terms for that payment, and now they owe that money to the vendors, to the publishers, or to people who are owed a check from Diamond. And Diamond is saying that due to supply chain disruptions, they can't make those payments. Now, here's what's interesting about this and a little alarming, is that in theory, these were products that had already gone through. Certainly, Diamond had likely not received payments from several, and they do cite that in the letter, that they're not receiving consistent payments from their customers, which means they're in turn passing along the "we can't pay you." Now, you can draw one of two things from this. Either that Diamond was running such a tight hand-to-mouth operation, and what I mean by that is, their incoming money was what their outgoing money. They weren't keeping a heavy stockpile of cash, what people call a war chest. They weren't keeping money in the bank in order to, weather cash flow disruptions, or at least not enough of it. That's one story, and that's the likely problem here, is that Diamond just did not have a lot of cash flow reserves, or maybe because this hit so immediately, within a week of basically them having to stop, less than 1 to 2 weeks of cash flow. Again, that's speculation on my part, but the speed of this movement suggests at least that they have problems. The other scenario here is that they do have cash flow, but they're taking advantage, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but they're taking advantage of the situation by saying, we're not receiving payments, so we're going to slow down payments outside. We're going to make sure that we don't burn through our capital when we don't have it incoming. We're basically going to pass the lack of funding along to our publishers. Both have implications, and the biggest implication is that Diamond has exclusivity agreements with a number of their people. Now, I'm not sitting here as a publisher looking at my exclusivity agreement. I'm not, even if I could, I wouldn't be able to pass that information along. But generally, there's terms in contracts called breach, and one of the contexts of breach is lack of payment. Most of these companies all have 30-day or some amount of float terms in terms of when cash needs to be delivered and what deadlines are. But it seems pretty clear at this point that most likely Diamond is in breach with several of their publishers, which means their exclusivity agreements could in fact be null and void. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean, hooray, everything breaks open now and publishers can go and work with other distributors or sell direct to comic shops, anything else. Most publishers don't have the infrastructure to do it. You've heard a lot from Boom, from TKO, from all these different studios Alterna, who have been trying to get this direct to store business going. And it's been a struggle because a lot of shops don't have the bandwidth to work with multiple suppliers. And so it's not simple that they do this. However, it's now forcing the publishers, both the shutdown and now lack of payment, to make those plans. So this means one of two things is going to happen. The most likely one is that you're going to see a number of publishers and a number of suppliers find other channels, some good, some bad. They're not going to pull the plug on Diamond because until they have really viable new places to hop over to, they're going to leave things the way they are. At least they're not going to shoot themselves in one foot before they've found a place to put the other foot. But as these new suppliers are found, certainly the Diamond's the reliance on Diamond is going to shrink, and the willingness to do business with Diamond is going to shrink. So all this has kind of a domino effect. Unfortunately for Diamond, it is true that they're living very close hand to mouth, and they didn't have significant cash reserves of any significance, then this basically drives all of their publishers by being unable to fulfill their contract to find other sources, and undoubtedly some will. Now, what's most likely to happen here is that the publishers will find the Random House or the big guys. They will figure out a deal with Amazon, or they will go somewhere that already exists. What's very unlikely to happen is that a small startup or some brand new company says, you know what, I feel like losing money for 3 years. I'm going to create my own distribution house, and I'm going to become the new Diamond, and I'm going to convince all these other big companies to go with me. Not only would that be very unlikely for big companies to want to put their fates into a small unknown startup, Time Warner, Disney would certainly not want them to do that, particularly after what just happened with Diamond. So more than likely, you're going to see people try and get these things to other places. And some of them, like Scholastic, for example, may become very encouraged to do this. They've been wanting to, figure out new ways to get into this market. And so that very well could happen. What's also, I think, this is more of a long shot, but now suddenly becoming more possible, is that if they go with a distributor like a Scholastic or somebody like that, those distributors who potentially have a lot more reach and power than Diamond in their traditional publishing methods will figure out a way to crack back open the newsstand, go to places beyond simply comic stores. They will want to expand their business. Any traditional larger publisher that exists today are not going to want to slide into exactly the same structure Diamond had. They're going to want to own different parts of that chain, and that could be a healthy thing for the comic industry in the long term. In the short term, though, this is bad news, really bad news, because basically by saying we're not going to be able to deliver payment to our customers, to our vendors, it's going to put a lot of those vendors who are also living on a very tight margin, very hand-to-mouth. It puts them in a very dangerous position where they have to lay off people, or they have to shutter their parts of their business because they also have bills. So this does create a ripple effect. And because it's creating a ripple effect, like I said at the beginning, it's going to strongly motivate people to do something else, to find other sources and to get out of this single source problem. I think if there's one very solid prediction I would have, I'll give you two. One, yes, digital, people are going to have to take that very seriously now and figure out their model. The more interesting one is the comic industry is absolutely changing, and the days of there being a monopoly or a single source, i.e. Diamond, to do all this, that day is over. That's only hung on as long as it has because of legal reasons, because of these contracts, because it wasn't worth enough money both to break the contract and there weren't ready options that could do it. But now those contracts have been broken, and so changes have to take place. I'd be very worried about the long-term viability of Diamond. I think some of the moves DC made definitely indicate that they're worried about it too. And where all this plays out, it's hard to say how quickly things topple, but definitely things are starting to topple pretty fast now. So that's some general context to what's going on. Bad news for Diamond, probably bad news for comics, although long term there is a possibility it gets things onto a more stable ground. Some of my predictions there that may or may not come to pass. What's interesting is if you go to the comic book predictions playlist on my channel, you'll see me talking about kind of the exact same topics. Obviously, I did not foresee a virus coming or the way this would play out, but the steps that are being taken. In fact, I even mentioned there that you would see, some breach of contract or some ability where the strain of the business would force a contract violation. You would see somebody like DC or Marvel to take matters into their own hands and find a different solution. That is what we're seeing now. So, optimistic view, this gets us to a better place. Negative view, unfortunately, some companies are going to go out of business. In addition to just comic shops, some publishers, some vendors, some suppliers, there's going to be some job loss here and definitely some negative effects. But let me know what questions you have in the comments below. I'll try and answer whatever I can. Like, subscribe if you don't mind. Follow me on Twitter at Perch. And as always, thanks for listening. And hey, stay safe out there.